This episode deals with grief and death. Please see the show notes if you're struggling and need additional support.
I'm Stephanie Cole, and this music is really inappropriate for this episode.
I'm Monique Hammond, and please make it stop. We are so sorry. This is the Modern Adults podcast, where we explore the modern adult landscape and ask dumb questions about adulthood so that you don't have to.
We really have no dignity. Coming up in this episode, we're talking about grief and in particular, how to cope with grief in your 20s. If you've lost a parent or a partner or a friend, young people who have experienced significant loss early in life find it hard to communicate their grief to friends. They can never comprehend your grief or loss, and that feeling is isolating and frustrating. If this is you, I see you, and this episode is for you. Welcome to my little unspoken grief club. Let's get this sad party started.
In this episode, we're joined by my partner, Jamie.
Hello.
And so to begin, I think we should all talk a bit about the grief that each of us has experienced, and I'll go first. So I've been really lucky that almost no one close to me has died. So out of my whole extended family, parents, siblings, aunts, uncles, cousins, and grandparents, I've only ever had one grandparent die, and that was a year ago. So I haven't had any friends die, and I'm in the very lucky position where I haven't experienced much grief in my life.
In my life, I've experienced quite a significant loss early on. I was 11 years old when my mum passed away quite suddenly from a heart attack. As you can guess, it was quite hard for an 11-year-old going into quite formative years as a teenager, experiencing that loss and knowing, one, what to do with that loss, and two, how the hell are you supposed to be a teenager without any guidance whatsoever? You live in a household with your father and your brother who are just boys, and you have no other female guidance in your life, nor does anyone you know how to talk to you about your grief, because everyone my age, they had two healthy parents, and so I found it incredibly hard, and for a long time I was quite isolated with my grief, which is why I internalized a lot of it and I didn't seek the help I needed to, and that followed me for a long time into my early 20s, and it created a lot of social anxiety for myself because I would just stay at home and I wouldn't talk to anybody, and so going into my 20s, I was having to unlearn a lot of those practices, and it's really hard going into 20s, especially when you're having like graduations, you're getting your first like real job, and you don't have the main parent that you want at those times where you need them. Like, I can't imagine now I have to get married without my mum there, which is crazy. I have conversations with my partner, and to no fault, it's like not her fault at all, but she talks about how she gets to like pick out the dress with her mum and like do all these pre-wedding things where I'm not going to have any of that. I'm going to be very alone almost on that day, and I'm going to be experiencing, I'm going to be happy on those days, like some exciting things are happening, but I've always got that niggling feeling that something's not right because I'm missing another half of me who's no longer with me. But I know, Jamie, you have mine happened like over 10 years ago now, whereas I know you're experiencing a bit of a fresher loss than me, so it's quite a different experience. Do you want to share a bit?
Yeah, sure. So from my angle is about almost 2 years ago, my father passed away from cancer, and that's, again, like, it's a very different scenario as opposed to what you experienced, Steph. So a lot of the things that you've mentioned, like I feel the same way about in like what you're talking about with achievements and stuff. Because I felt, at least in my earlier 20s, I wasn't really doing anything that was, I don't know, I personally thought of an achievement. So I think it's, you know, other than the kind of like fresh grief of the whole event and everything, as you're starting to like get back onto like just doing life and all that kind of jazz, you start to realize, like, as your shirt perfectly says it, all achievements feel very bittersweet. So yeah, I feel like a lot of my earlier time spent with my dad, I was like growing up. So, you know, I'm so thankful to have all that, but now I feel like I'm more my own person. I'm actually pursuing things that I feel like fulfill me more, as opposed to just like, you know, having a job, making money. That's like, you know, those are achievements, but now I feel like I'm personally achieving more, and, you know, not having, you know, one of my biggest fans around for that is, you know, it just feels, you've got like that slight emptiness to any victory. So
would you say that the passing of your dad kind of triggered your motivation to go out and pursue all these things that you want to pursue?
Not necessarily. It was around the same time as when he was like diagnosed. Like I was already feeling like absent at my workplace, and I wasn't really, you know, I wasn't really interested in, like, I guess the motivators for that workplace was like money and like getting more money. And then it was like, well, you know, there's more than just, you know, pursuing money. And then with my father dying, it did influence it more, but I was definitely starting to head there.
I have a friend who reached out recently to me saying that her mum has just passed away from cancer, and she reached out to tell me that she was finding it difficult to communicate with others around her, and I was the only one who really understood what she was going through. And I didn't have the experience where my parent was slowly dying of cancer. It was very kind of sudden for me, and so I carry around a lot of, oh, what if I had done this, and what if I don't know, the night it happened I noticed something and told my dad to take my mum to the hospital, and so none of this would have happened. But for you knew it was coming for a long time. Was there anything, or is there anything you can advise someone else who's in a similar situation on how to kind of cope with that? I know there's nothing you can really say, but there's obviously practices you can put in place to make yourself feel better and more present.
So I guess when coping with someone who's like slowly suffering and has like a terminal prognosis, I think spending, like, no matter how much time you spend with them, I think you're probably going to regret not spending more time with them. So I think spending as much time as possible and quality time with them, like, is really important. So I think it's important to take breaks and not feel guilty about taking breaks, because, you know, it can take a bit of a toll on your mental state. And I think, like, you know, my dad and I didn't really talk about any of it. And I'm not like, I don't feel that like I missed out much on having that kind of conversation, but I feel a lot of people might. I think if your parent or loved one is open to talking about that, and you feel like, I think it would be worth talking to them about it, just so in retrospect you have like how they're feeling about it. And, you know, that I think that's interesting to have, like, you get a fuller view of them as a person. And I guess, are we talking about coping after as well, or?
Yeah. I mean, leading up to it is a hard thing to process because all you can think about is the inevitable, and it's hard to be present in the moment when you know what lies ahead. Did you kind of struggle with being present with your father, or?
Yeah, definitely. I think something that a lot of people don't realize when it comes to variations of cancer is it's not necessarily the cancer that you're diagnosed with that is what kills you.
Yeah.
So with my father who's diagnosed with lung cancer, that's not what eventually killed him. Like the cancer spread to his spine and his brain. Mm-hmm. So initially when you think like lung cancer and like what my interpretation was of the deathbed kind of thing is what you get from films and that, they're like coughing blood and then it's like, oh, looks like it's my last few weeks or whatever. So they're like in the bedside giving you wise words of wisdom, and then it's sad, but it's also like, I don't know, more expected or more pleasant. But what you don't realize is when cancer's sort of spread to kind of key regions like the brain and spine, the person kind of dies twice. Yeah. So the first thing you'll see is the person that they die, and then you gotta like keep caring for them until their body dies.
Yeah.
And I think out of like everything, not like the actual death, but that period where you like see them die the first time and then you just care for their body.
Yeah.
That was like mentally the biggest toll. Yeah. And I think that's something that, like, looking back, if I was aware of that more, because I wasn't like, no one told me about that. Like, even when people, a doctor says, oh, the cancer spread to whatever, like it doesn't really mean anything.
Yeah.
So I think if anyone, I think that's something that people need to be aware of and have like support structures in place for that kind of stuff. I think that's something that I didn't know and I wish someone had talked to me about.
Yeah, I definitely think self-care is one of the biggest things that you could do for yourself during that period, because I assume it was very traumatizing for you watching your father go through that, and now that he's passed, that's probably what stays with you all the time, would you say?
Yeah, I think so. I think I hope that, well, I don't know, because it kind of like sullies their memory a bit because they've lived for so much longer than those months that occurred, but it's so like stuck in your brain. Hopefully over time it'll kind of fade and the other memories will be more, but it's it's not great. I think for me personally, I'm a bit more like emotionally repressed, so I was able to and I have quite a good handle on my emotions, so I feel a lot more equipped to cope day to day. So I think for people who are, maybe slightly more emotional, more free with their emotions, I don't know if that would be a benefit in the long term. Well, it probably would be, but at least in the short term, I think for a lot of people it would be a lot more unbearable, I think.
I think maybe that was the difference between you and me, where you had kind of learnt by that stage to have a handle on your emotions, whereas me, an 11-year-old, doesn't know what's happening, what to do. But I did want to get into more of the aftermath, and on a lighter note, I just wanted to talk about shit you don't say when someone dies, because I have heard it all and it's awful, and people need to know what not to say to someone who is grieving. Let me get my list out. Everything happens for a reason. Bullshit. God wanted another angel. The amount of times I heard that at my mother's funeral, like, so many people came up to me and said the exact same thing, which is crazy. They won't get to heaven unless they know you're okay. Awful.
Someone said that to you?
Yeah.
I've
heard them all.
That's a really horrible thing to say.
But people think they're coming from a good place, but I don't understand how you can say something like that. And
I don't understand how you could say any of those things, because they're all kind of bullshit.
Yeah.
Especially they won't get into heaven until they know you're okay. Fuck that.
Yeah.
But as someone who hasn't dealt with that grief and probably didn't handle Jamie's grief the best, like, what is something good that you can say? Because, like, I know when I was in that situation where, like, my partner was grieving, like, what do you say to that? Apart from, I'm so sorry this is happening. That's not really a great thing to say either.
It's really hard because I think a lot of people handle grief differently. Like Jamie said, he was more in touch with his emotions, where I was not. I was an 11-year-old. So what you say to a 20... How old are you, Jamie?
I'm 27 now, so 27, it was 2 years ago.
Yeah, what you say to a 25-year-old compared to an 11-year-old is very different.
Yeah.
But I think general advice is just giving people space to do what they want, but letting them know that you're there if they need you. I think that was the best thing for me. But my experience was a little bit different because I had kids in school who everyone in the school was told what had happened to me. So I would have kids coming up to me being like, did your mum die? Like, is your mum dead? What happened? And I'm like, I want to go home. Which was
crazy. Did you tell them to fuck off?
I was 11. I would swear.
Have told them to fuck off.
I was at a Christian school. Good girl.
So was I.
But it was a little bit different. So I think definitely just space and letting people know that you're there for them. What about you?
Yeah, like, thankfully, at least, I don't know, I think, yeah, you're very right. Like, being a child, I feel people feel like they've got the, like, because you are a child, they're like, well, I'll say something mythical and comforting, or, you know, they don't quite understand, or, you know, some other bullshit like that. So thankfully, no one really said anything like that to me. There's nothing, like you said, there's nothing you can really say. And, like, for me personally, the less you say, the better. Like, sorry is fine, or just like a head nod is also fine.
Yeah.
And also, like, don't touch me. Like, when
I know.
Like, particularly when, like, you're in that, like, fresh grief.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know what it was like for you. Again, being like 11, it might have been a bit different, but, like, for me, it was like, just don't touch me. Like, for some reason, I don't know, there's a lot of stuff going on, and it's like, I'd prefer you to be at a distance, and offering, like, just appearing open, I think helps, and facilitating, like, a few of my friends, well, one friend in particular was very facilitating in just hanging out, and just being like, I'm available, or hey, let's go do this, or nothing with, like, the pretext of, hey, let's go deal with your grief. Which I think that is a good way to handle it. But I think a lot of people, just because, like, we're selfish creatures, they think, I feel bad for your loss, so I want to try and make myself feel better about your loss, so I'm going to try and do something actively that makes me feel better. A lot of people don't consciously realize that's what their mindset is doing, because a lot of the time, if depending on where you are in, like, the circle of the person's, like, you know, friends, family circle, the best thing you might be able to do is to not talk to them, and not, like, you might not have that relationship, so, you know, doing nothing is an option. So I guess very different scenarios. Just try and say as little as possible, I think, and just being open for
I also think don't approach someone, because for me, I don't want anybody's pity. And the second I start to sense that, I start to resent you for it. And I think you've already got enough resentment built up from the situation that when people approach you with kind of a selfish motivation, and I mean, they don't know they're being selfish, but people reach out to just do it for the sake of doing it. And I hate when people do that. Like you said, I think the best thing people can do is just offer you a time to kind of just go out and do something without the pretext of it being about dealing with your grief. You don't have to talk about this, but I just wanted to ask how it affected your relationship when your dad died.
Didn't go really well. I think when Jamie was saying about the sort of like trying to make you feel better for your own reasons rather than trying to make someone feel better. Like I've never gone through grief, so I didn't know how to handle it because I was like, what can I do to make it better? Like, tell me what I can do and we'll do it.
Yeah.
Like, do you want to go to therapy? We'll go to therapy. Do you want to like go for a walk? We can go for a walk. Like, what can I do to make this better? And that was really annoying, I think.
Yeah, it wasn't the best. Like, I could see you were trying, but it did it's very difficult to understand a person who's in grief, their mindset. It's very erratic and like heightened as well. Like, even just looking at someone with sad eyes, it's like, I'm going to punch you right now because fuck off.
Oh, no.
Like, it's just it's really
that
delicate.
Pity factor. Just seeing it in their eyes is the worst because you don't want anyone's pity. It's just you're going through something yourself. You don't want to express how you're feeling to someone else. You just want to process it and move on. I think that's what someone with grief is trying to do.
Yeah.
And when you're bringing in someone else into the equation, it's really hard in a relationship because your partner obviously wants to help you. They hate seeing you like this, but there's nothing you can really do apart from giving them time and space.
Yeah.
And I guess like for like a partner's sake, it makes you feel helpless that you're not actively contributing.
Yeah, I think that was the thing. It was mainly like there was nothing I could do. So I tried to do everything, but none of it was particularly helpful. And I think we've discussed that it just didn't really.
What resolution did you come to?
Time.
Yeah, it was mostly just time. And I think it was just a really emotional time for Jamie. And then I found that really hard to deal with for myself as well.
Did you also feel like you weren't doing enough or you weren't enough in that scenario to be able to give him what he needed?
Yeah, I felt really, I guess, and this is not a bad thing, but I felt really like shut out. So it was like there was something that you've experienced that I could never, like that I have never experienced, like, and I just didn't know how to handle it. And you were dealing with losing someone really close to you, and I just felt like it's all of a sudden I didn't know you at all from that.
I don't think you were equipped to handle the situation
I was not equipped
at
to
all.
handle that. And it was just sort of the day your dad died, I was like, all right, I'm out. And I was out for like 6 months before we like got back on track, I think. Yeah. It wasn't fun.
No.
But like these things happen and you just kind of work through it and deal with it. And I think if it had happened now instead of 2 years ago, like it would be a very different outcome.
Yeah.
And it's also interesting, like what you were saying before, Steph, about, friends with families and stuff. Like, it's immediately after, like, I went through a very, strong period of, like, jealousy and anger.
Yeah.
So, like, even without Monique knowing it, if she was, like, doing stuff with her family, I was, like, jealous and angry. And, like, I was just constantly angry at because it's a very cliche thing how people say if someone dies and life goes on, but the words don't really mean anything until it happens to you. and then that's when you feel it, you're existing, and like you go back to your job and like the job's the same, like everything's the same, but your entire worldview is different.
Yeah.
And you're just like, you're just like angry and confused, and yeah,
I definitely feel that still. Now I look at, even like, I just look at my family and it just feels broken. It feels like in a family picture portrait there's like a missing piece in it, and when I look at other people's, they've got a complete picture, and I'm like, why can't I have that? What did I do wrong? Like, how could I have changed this outcome? I don't want this. And it's more frustrating than anything for me, I think, just seeing that. And I don't want to be resentful, but it does make me angry and it makes me upset, and I wish it could be different, but what can you do?
Yeah, I find it, like, again, what we were saying about like what can people say, one thing that I can't remember, someone made a really poor, like, dark joke. I don't think it was this, but it was infinitely better than someone saying like, I'm sorry for your loss. I think someone was like, oh, so your mum's single now? And like, I thought that was hilarious.
Oh my God.
For a specific type of person.
And like, for me personally, I like, there's something about, like, I could not get through, like, a lot of the way I deal with grief and stress and like a lot of things is humor. And like, for me, like, even just dark jokes, it's just, I don't know, if you can't find humor in the dark places, like, for me, like, you're lost. Like, that's it, you're gone.
Yeah.
So that was pretty funny.
Okay, I think maybe we should wrap up this topic by just talking about just general coping mechanisms that have helped both Jamie and I kind of get to where we are. We're at a point where we can exist, we can be happy, we can live our lives without being angry and frustrated and just wanting to cry every second of every day. Like you said, you get a lot of joy from humor and dark jokes. And I think something that definitely helped me was just talking about it, especially with a professional, because for about 5 or 6 years I internalized all of my grief and I didn't talk to a single person about it. I shut out all my family, I didn't talk to anybody, and that was the worst thing I could have done. So I definitely think reach out to a professional if you don't have someone in your immediate family or network that you can talk to about this properly.
And talking to a professional, I think, is very different than talking to friends or family, because they're equipped to give you skills that a friend or family might not. So it's probably worth talking to a professional regardless of who you have supporting you.
And yeah, I think also it can damage, you need to be aware, like, speaking to friends and family can like damage, at least in the short term, your relationship with them, because you want something out of them, and if they don't give that to you, it's like, you know, it's you might feel like you've been let down by them. But when you're paying the exorbitant rates of a therapist, it's not quite the same story.
Yeah, so if you don't have anyone close to you that you can talk about, or if you can't afford a professional, I know I'm not a professional, but you can reach out to me here at Modern Adults Podcast, and I will give you all my time in particular to talk to you and just give you some comfort and tell you that you'll be okay. And I am living proof, Jamie's proof, that you do make it out. And I know that's an awful thing to say when you're grieving, and I know it's hard when you're in the middle of it, but you will be okay. And if you need help, I will be here to help you through it if you need it. If today's episode has helped you, please leave us a review on iTunes and spread the word. If you have a friend or loved one who is grieving, send them this episode and let them know that you're there for them. Additional support is in our show notes.